we did not know what we didn't know. And so we thought, oh, it's going to be 6 months, we'll have the product launched. It ended up taking 4 years to get from when we won the contest to the Kickstarter. The market need was so strong that it kept pulling us forward.
Hello and welcome to Why Design. I'm your host Chris White, and this is the first of 3 episodes recorded in person while out in Boston, chatting with founders and product leaders who are building real things and solving real-world problems in the hardware space. On this episode, I'm joined by Sam Shames, co-founder of Ember Labs, a company that spent the last decade developing wearable technology to help people regulate their body temperature. Sam started Ember while studying materials science and engineering at MIT. What began as a late-night prototype in a hackathon has since grown into a fully fledged business that sold well over 200,000 units and is now preparing to launch its 3rd-generation product, combining predictive AI with a circular subscription model. In this episode, we get into what it really takes to build a sustainable hardware company, navigating early manufacturing challenges, making tough team decisions like hiring an external CEO, and rethinking business models without losing sight of the original mission. If you're building or scaling a physical product, Sam's story is packed with honest lessons and insights that you'll want to hear. So let's get into it. Sam Shames, welcome to Why Design. We're here in Boston, out in Needham Heights, and recording the first of my trip to Boston in person. So great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Ember Labs is a company that's building wearable thermal technology, and you've sold over 200,000 units. Recently made the shift to subscription-based model, which is quite rare in consumer wearables. You've had product, operations, fundraising, and more as the business has evolved. So you've kind of made the shift really from material science to overall kind of business ops.
Mm-hmm.
As we all know, hardware is hard. So,
certainly is. Thanks so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. It's great to have you, and thanks for making the trip. So, why design? Where did it all begin for you? Obviously, you're more of a mechanical materials engineer, but how did you get into engineering in the first place?
So growing up, I'd say I always liked math and science. And actually, my grandfather, he was a mechanical engineer, and he had woodworking tools in his basement and was always building things and would kind of take us under his wing, so to speak. So had that exposure, and I think saw how cool it was to be able to kind of take an idea from your head and bring it into reality. And then, was lucky enough to get into MIT for undergrad and just to be in an environment surrounded by incredibly smart people who are all passionate about different things and building. And I think when you're in that environment, it really inspires you. And, our company, it started as a prototyping contest. My co-founders and I entered this prototyping contest with no plan of starting a company, just with the goal of building something cool over the summer. And when we came up with the idea for a wearable that heats and cools, we never could have imagined that it would lead to 12 years later having the company that we have.
That's a wild ride, isn't it? So where did that idea for the temperature regulation then come from?
So we entered this prototyping contest not really knowing what our idea was. The goal was just, hey, can we win $10,000? That would be a huge amount of money, pay for all the beer we'd ever need for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And we were brainstorming ideas in an over air-conditioned lab in June, and we kept having to put on sweatshirts to stay comfortable.
Right.
So we thought, this is crazy. Like, what if we could just heat and cool ourselves directly? Wouldn't that be a better way? So that was sort of the aha moment. And then we said, okay, well, let's try to make a wristband that heats and cools. We were familiar with, the old wives' tale of running your wrist under cold water. And, we thought, well, surely that can't work. Surely that isn't a good idea. And it turned out we ended up, coming up with some key technological breakthroughs to how we heat and cool that made it much more effective. And that ultimately led us to win the prototyping contest and start down this journey we're still on.
That's amazing. Do you recall kind of the other competitors, what you're up against? Was it a case of there was one winner, or was it a general?
So it was maybe 4 or 5 other competitors, and I use that term pretty loosely. It was all people from our department. Everyone was friendly.
I'm guessing you've known nothing else, right, in your professional career than the business that you started. So, you've had to figure a lot of stuff along the way, haven't you?
Definitely.
So yeah, it's interesting. I wonder how many of those that started in a similar journey are still going 12 years later. So,
very few. Yeah, I think we look at our, quote unquote vintage of startup companies, and very rare to be going as long as we've had. And I think especially even more so for companies that are really creating new categories, and of course hardware companies as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the biggest pitfalls I see from kind of the recruiter's lens. It's the easiest way to burn money as a startup is by having a lack of experience in how businesses run, being taken advantage of by suppliers, especially if you're using overseas, because you haven't built up that experience and know what stuff should cost.
Yeah.
So where do you haggle to? Where do you bargain? So,
and we definitely did not have that experience. We feel really lucky that we met a lot of really kind and generous mentors through MIT and other places who really helped guide us in those kind of early years. And, there were certainly some close calls, but thanks to all the support we got, we were able to, find that narrow path.
Yeah. So if there's anyone listening or watching that's, they're about to embark on a similar journey, or they're considering kind of taking that prototype to the next level, is there anything that you wish you'd have known 12 years ago that you'd like to share with them now?
Yeah, many, many things. I think that the first thing that comes to mind is that it's never too early to start thinking about manufacturing. That the difference between a prototype and a product that you can manufacture at an acceptable cost is vast, and that the mistake people often make is they say, okay, we're going to work with a product designer. And a great product designer does not necessarily have experience with manufacturing. And the earlier you can figure out who your manufacturing partner is going to be, validate that they want to work with you, and then bring them into the design process, ultimately the faster you're going to get to market, the lower cost you're going to be, and the more likely you're going to be successful.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So starting at MIT, you validated it on Kickstarter, I think you said, and then you've grown it into a full company over the years. Walk us through those early days then, from kind of hackathon to Kickstarter to when it felt like I've got a real business here.
Yeah, it kind of comes in stages. So we're doing this prototyping contest this is summer 2013. We win in October 2013, and we thought, great, we did it. What happened next was the idea went totally viral. One news office story by MIT ended up getting picked up by bloggers, and next thing you know, I'm doing an interview with Wired.
Wow.
From all that media attention, we started to get emails from thousands of people around the world saying two things. One, temperature is the biggest pain point in my life. And two, when can I buy this? So that was the moment I said, okay, hey, people want to buy this. We should start a company. We did not know what we didn't know. And so we thought, it's going to be 6 months. We'll have the product launched. And, then 6 months later, someone's going to buy us. And, how hard could it be? It ended up taking 4 years to get from when we won the contest to the Kickstarter. And we were really focused on three things during that time. One was understanding the market. So of the people who emailed us, who were these different segments of potential customers, what were their product requirements, and ultimately which one could we best serve. Second is really understanding the science. Why is it that just heating and cooling this one spot actually can have an overall effect? Is it real, or is it just placebo? And then third was actually doing iterative prototypes. And, it took probably a dozen different prototypes to actually get to something where we felt like, okay, this is what the product needs to look like. Now we can begin the actual product design. And then, of course, manufacturing. So 4 years to get to Kickstarter. That was really the next moment when we said, okay, we really have something. Our goal was to do $100,000 in sales. We ended up exceeding that in the first couple hours of the campaign and finished at about $630,000 in sales. And after that, we basically were like, okay, we're a real business. We're generating revenue. And, that took us into basically the first half of 2018. That was when, we finished fulfilling those Kickstarter units. My co-founders and I looked around the table and we said, well, we always thought, okay, you launch the product, ... you get acquired. We're now in the ... We don't really know ourselves what kind of the next steps are as clearly, but we do have a sense it's much more about building the business than building the technology. And our expertise is more on the technology side. So that's when we actually made the decision to work with a recruiter and to hire an external CEO.
Oh, cool.
We interviewed dozens and dozens of candidates, and we found Elizabeth Gazda, who's still Ember CEO today, and she's just been absolutely transformational in the company, and one of the best decisions we ever made was to bring her on.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's, I've recently started my founder's journey as well, and I resonate with that. You just get stuck in to let's just deliver something. Mm-hmm. But then actually at some point you need to step back and go, what am I building? What does the future look like? Is it a sale? Is it kind of its legacy? Is it a big company, a small company? And that's the kind of thing that you need to take a lot of time to step back and think about, or bring in someone who has got the credibility and the background to do that. So, what do you think has been the biggest shift then since taking on the CEO?
Well, I think initially it was going from thinking of this as like a project to a real business. And then I think second, it was just really instilling that customer first mindset of saying, hey, look, at the end of the day, if we do right by the customer and let them guide us, everything else will kind of follow. So, I feel so fortunate personally to have really learned so much about actually, building a business from Elizabeth. And I think our whole team feels the same way. When she joined, we had just shipped a few thousand units. Today, it's well north of 200,000 devices. It's multiple generations of hardware product. And, so much of that is from what we've learned from her.
That's awesome. What do you think was, we're kind of going off script a little bit here, but it's genuinely interesting. When you brought Elizabeth on, obviously you and your co-founders, you're kind of ceding some control to someone else is kind of taking the baby, taking the business. So how was that? How did you what was the hardest or the most challenging things about that transformation point with the business?
So I think in some ways the hardest part was actually deciding that we needed to hire someone in the first place, because it's that acceptance of, we really need this help. We can't do it alone. Then once we actually met Elizabeth, it was so clear through the recruiting process that she was the right person to lead the company. And she just really worked hard to build trust, and especially early on to really build consensus and really show her thinking that, sort of very obvious that we wanted to really, kind of give up that control, because we didn't really have a clear sense of direction of what we needed to do.
What was her background then? Has she launched or led hardware companies before?
So she had quite a varied background across multinationals and startups. Her career started at Philips in the Netherlands. Then she'd worked doing mobile advertising startups, doing consumer web startups. So a little less on like consumer hardware startups, but both startup experience and multinational experience.
Awesome. Yeah, I think having that exposure at the opposite ends and seeing because that's working with quite a lot of clients at the moment that are going from that transition from scrappy startup to let's just get something out to market to, okay, now we need to build a solid, credible kind of revenue generating, profit making business that's got legs, So it's, and sometimes the people in the business aren't always the right people for the next level as well, because you, like it or not, the culture is going to change, isn't it, as the business kind of scales. So, but sounds like you've got a really good leader there. So let's talk about the hardware before it turns into a recruitment program. So you've said you shipped over 200,000 units, coming up to launching Generation 3 is.
So we kind of understand the big picture concept for Generation 3, and we've talked about this publicly, which is that we've developed AI to actually predict hot flashes so that the device can start cooling automatically. That's kind of one of our core use cases is today. It's manually cooling hot flashes with the push of a button or with the mobile app, but we have AI that can predict that. So that's really going to be the key feature into Gen 3. We haven't talked publicly about the launch timeline yet. It's not something we can go into, but we are pretty excited about, really the evolution of the product.
Yeah.
And as we thought about just how much of a leap we were able to go from Gen 1 to Gen 2 and how much we've learned, and then, feeling like we can deliver a similar leap from Gen 2 to Gen 3.
Yeah, it's awesome. So it sounds like the leap from Gen 1 to Gen 3 is absolutely huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you said your use case there in terms of kind of helping alleviate the symptoms of hot flashes. I'm guessing it's still a pain point of, oh, I'm having a hot flash, I need to push a button to reduce that time then, or to make it null and void completely. Is
absolutely. Yeah, so the kind of core experience for many of our customers is getting hot flashes 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times a day, getting it at night, and really just feeling very powerless and out of control. And so the ability to, with the push of a button, start getting that cooling relief. And what's amazing is not only is it just, a cold sensation on your wrist, which just feels pleasant, right? If you're too hot and you feel something cold, you splash water on your face, that feels good. But actually, the way in which we're cooling, which is in our patented waves of temperature, where it's not a constant sensation, it's waves, which you remember trying at CES, that application of temperature actually is signaling the brain to help balance the nervous system and actually stop a hot flash in its tracks, because people don't realize that a hot flash is actually an overactivation of the nervous system.
That's really interesting. So how did this all come about then in terms of the, because it sounds like you've done a lot of research into this, the science behind it, from that initial kind of, well, we know it's a thing, kind of let's build a prototype to, I'm guessing you've done countless user studies and.
Yeah, absolutely. So many user studies at this point. We've been fortunate enough to do some clinical studies where kind of it all began was in that prototyping contest when we were basically trying it out. We thought it felt good, and we started to tell people the idea, and even then we'd get the question like, does it work for hot flashes? Yeah. And of course, like our first answer is like, we don't know anything about hot flashes, but let's find out. So actually my mom and her friends were some of our first beta testers. So we were just kind of giving them prototypes, having them try it out, asking them lots of questions, using that to really understand some of the key product requirements. So for example, one of the initial insights was that the design was going to be as important as the functionality, because this is a wearable. It's something that people are choosing to put on. It's visible. If it looks ugly or looks like a medical device, people aren't going to use it. And we saw that firsthand when we would give someone an early prototype, and they'd say, well, it worked great, but I didn't use it. And they'd say, why? But they're like, have you seen it? Like, I'm not going to wear that out to the grocery store or anything like that. So we realized the design itself was, and the aesthetics were going to be very important. We realized that although there's a mobile app, it's really important for users to be able to basically start cooling as quickly as possible. So that led to okay, there needs to be physical buttons and one button press to start cooling. So those are some of the key insights from those initial studies. And at this point, now we're very fortunate to also just get user feedback in the field. So today, we're seeing customers use the product for about 1 million minutes every week. So we're really learning at a very rapid scale about how exactly the product is fitting into people's daily lives.
Yeah, because I'm guessing because you've got that mobile app, you're getting data constantly, aren't you? So that's fantastic. But no, that's wonderful. So is the long-term vision more medical bias then, or more wellness, or something else?
Yeah, I think there's really elements of both. Broadly speaking, I think of temperature as a key tool for helping people feel their best. And it's incredibly safe. It doesn't have any side effects. So it doesn't need to be a regulated medical device in any way. It can be something that all of us just have the moments in our day when we feel too hot or too cold, or we feel stressed, or we feel like we're having trouble sleeping, or we're feeling like hot flashes. And, that, of course, is where we can be very helpful. At the same time, there are users with more serious medical conditions who are benefiting. So, for example, folks with dysautonomia, which is a thermoregulatory disorder, or MS, or POTS, which is actually can be a symptom of long COVID.
Okay.
So all of those cases where just the body has a much more challenging time actually doing thermoregulatory activities. And that's where, perhaps a different version that maybe has, some different features could be a medical device. But, I think our heart initial vision was always in the consumer space. We always thought, how do we get this as far and wide as possible? We can make the product at a price that works for consumers. It's very high quality. It's low risk, low side effect. Why not just try to really empower people to use temperature as a health and wellness practice?
Yeah, well, and also why make it harder for for yourselves.
that's true for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's talk about subscriptions and circularity then. So you mentioned when we prepared for this that the move into a subscription model was a game changer for you, and in terms of, especially from cash flow and how you're building the product. So what pushed you towards a subscription model in the first place?
Hey guys, just a quick one from me and then we'll get straight back to the episode. If you've ever felt like your pipeline is keeping you up at night, or you're not quite sure where to go next in your design career, and what you really want is to feel more in control of your business, your pipeline, your next move. Maybe even be the person your peers or competitors look to and think, they're onto something. Then check out the Why Design community. It's full of founders, leaders, engineers and designers working in hardware and physical product development. We share insights, run online and in-person meetups, collaborate on projects and help each other figure out what's working and what's not. If that sounds useful, head over to teamcoding.com/events to sign up. It's free, low pressure and genuinely made for people like you. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
So a couple of things. We had done very, very well selling devices. At the same time, we saw that when we sell someone a device, it's sort of a one-time transaction. We saw customers were continuing to use the product for multiple years. And, there was a sense in which there's a bit of a misalignment between the value creation and value capture, and doing so in a way that just structurally made it very hard to continue to grow the business, that you have to get new customers every month. And second, also just sort of limited our ability to continue to invest and make the product better, especially on the software side. Because without an ongoing revenue stream, all of that is a cost center. So those elements together made us start to think about, is there a model where we can really better have an ongoing relationship with customers that reflects how they continue to use the product, that aligns incentives so that, we want to continue to invest in that relationship. And subscription was a natural fit. And of course, we'd seen, over the years, more and more hardware companies are having a subscription component. Whoop, obviously, Oura Ring, even 8 Sleep. So we kind of saw that playbook develop. We looked at, of course, the software piece of the subscription, but we actually asked a question of, can we do something even simpler to start? And that led us to the path of actually just a hardware subscription. So it's truly paying $20 a month to get ongoing access to a device with the ability to cancel and send it back. Mm-hmm. And when we started to reach out to customers and explore this model, we actually heard that the ability to pay a low monthly amount was a benefit of itself as opposed to paying upfront, and the ability to cancel and send it back. And so those were actually 2 channel benefits that we could offer. And as we packaged those up with some things like a new device every 2 years, some discounts on accessories, some access to exclusive giveaways and promotions and content, we were able to come up with what we called the Embership subscription, and we saw just immediate product market fit. So we launched that in 2024, and over the next 8 months, we went from basically 0 to 15,000 subscribers, reaching about a 4 million ARR run rate. And, really, as you said, started to not just see the benefits of this ongoing relationship with customers, but also the financial benefits of knowing that there's going to be predictable cash flows every month that really helps us better make investments into R&D and into the just continued improvements of the product.
Yeah, because if there's economic issues, or if the product's not selling, you've got less of a cliff edge with a subscription, and you can see it coming. So you've got a longer kind of runway to do something about it. It's fascinating. So your customers clearly have responded well to this. And you've started to build in circularity too, which I guess the sheer fact that you're able to upgrade every 2 years, you're getting all the products back, you're able to recycle or refurbish products. But how do you make that work logistically?
Yeah, so returns is something that people don't necessarily talk about in the e-commerce space, and it's something we initially learned the hard way after launching, when you suddenly get packages sent back to your office, and even if it's a small percentage, it can be a large number, and if you don't know what to do with them, they quickly pile up. So, early on we realized, okay, we need to have a, refurbishment remanufacturing strategy. We were able to adopt the quality tests we did in the factory for a refurbishment process, and really saw some of the investments we made in product quality pay off, in that we were getting devices back that could be refurbished and were fully functional, and could of course be reused and resold at a discount. And so we had that kind of muscle, and then obviously the subscription business takes it to the next level, because there's churn, obviously, and you want to basically continue to leverage those devices. And so we worked to develop actually a tiered pricing model, where that $20 a month price is actually for a refurbished unit.
Okay.
You can upgrade and pay $25 for a brand new unit. And so then as people cancel, send it back, we can take those units and bring them forward again. And what's great about that is it really just, from a financial standpoint, maximizes the value of the asset. That, we've worked hard to make a product that lasts 3, 4, 5 years. Yeah. And now we can really start to monetize it over time. And of course, as we start to think about in the future, having a Gen 3, the Gen 2 becomes something that you can use at an even lower price point to help just get more and more folks into the system, and say, you could imagine a future where at some point Gen 2s may be available for $10 a month, because they're fully amortized, depreciated assets that, are still working, that you can really use to just try to, get folks who maybe can't afford to pay 20 or want to try out something before they go to the latest model.
What's the rough split then in terms of kind of latest versus the refurbished?
We see about a 50-50 split between folks choosing new versus refurbished.
Yeah. And do you see many, do you get the choice to upgrade? Like you can just kind of switch up to the next kind of subscription if you've had refurbished for a few months? You're like, actually, let's get the next one.
That's a very good question. I guess theoretically, not many people do, but you could then say, I want to start paying $25 a month. Be a manual process. You have to email our support team. But you definitely could. I think what most people find though is, the refurbished are functionally identical. We work really hard to make sure that they look good too. So I think most of the time people wouldn't necessarily remember after a couple months that it was even refurbished.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, is it say they've got a refurbished Gen 1 as this one's cheap, I'll try it out, because I'm a little bit skeptical and go, actually, that's awesome. Let's see how great the next generation is. Yeah,
we stopped selling Gen 1 after Gen 2 came out, but I could see a situation where with Gen 3 we do continue selling Gen 2, so probably more likely in a few years.
Yeah, really interesting, yeah. Interesting to see how that data kind of comes out. So
definitely.
So let's talk about the team and leadership and some lessons you've learned. I know we've kind of touched on that earlier, but what does the team look like today? I think you mentioned when we prepped it's about 13 people. So for did you say a 4 million turnover?
ARR,
ARR. So
we do have also device revenue, so we do still sell devices through our direct channels and wholesale. So the subscription business is just one revenue stream.
Still, pretty good return on 13 full-time heads. So what does the team look like now in terms of the structure, the kind of the skill sets within?
Yes, it's evolved over time. There's a period of time when we were very heavy in the engineering side, as we were really focused on getting the second generation to market. More recently, we were much more focused on the go-to-market, as the product was pretty mature, and we really needed to drive sales, drive customer acquisition. So that's kind of where most of the folks have been more recently, but obviously still keeping the key manufacturing personnel to produce the product, keeping the software folks to continue to keep it fresh.
Yeah, brilliant. And I imagine a fairly flat hierarchy as well. There's not too much leadership. Is there plans to scale that as the next generation comes down the line? Not a leading question, obviously, but just curious. It's for a business that's shipping so many units. I
think certainly we hope to continue to be able to grow, and I think obviously had a really interesting time right now with the AI agents and how that fits into headcount. But broadly speaking, there's clear benefits to scaling, while also knowing that we do have there's more market pressure on profitability. So we always try to say, it's probably not necessarily hiring ahead as much of anticipated demand, but if we get to the point where, we just can't keep up, then obviously you have to grow headcount.
Yeah, absolutely. So what have you learned over the years then about hiring? Because you've started a business whilst you were still a student, I suppose, you haven't been through the classic kind of route of working for someone else, seeing problems amongst your colleagues, and then maybe going up into team leadership and then seeing the problems amongst your team. You haven't had those good and bad experiences, I suppose. It's all been thrust on you. So what have you learned over the years then about hiring and team dynamics?
Yeah, so been through many different hiring cycles, have made good hires, have made less good hires. I think probably the thing that I've taken away most of all is that sort of like actually working with someone for a small period of time is infinitely better than the most rigorous interview-only process. And I think it's especially true in roles where you have not done it before, right? Like being good at interviewing is a very different skill than being good at a job.
Yeah.
And so we tried to err more and more towards, take-home exercises or more towards, okay, can we pay you to be a consultant for a month? And you just get so much more conviction. Alternatively, if you've done the role before and you know exactly what you're looking for, then it's much easier to screen. And I think the second piece is, the just importance of sort of like referrals, and that you can hire within your network or from people you trust, like that just leads to such a higher conviction that the person you're getting is who they say they are.
Massively, yeah. And I did a talk at Loughborough University a few weeks ago to a bunch of soon-to-be grads and how they can help prepare themselves for the job market. And from my experience, and it's one of those stats that it goes around all the time, so there must be some truth in it. But from my experience, roughly only 10% of roles are ever advertised. Yeah. Anyway, and then certainly when you get up to leadership positions, there's fewer of them anyway. And if only 10% of those few are ever advertised, it's like you haven't got any hope in finding them. But most are through word of mouth and through recommendation, because, like you say, you don't really know what you get until someone's been in post a few months, sometimes not even a year, until they start kind of having an impact in the team. So it's it's a really, really tricky thing to get right. Looking back, are there anything that you wish you would have done differently, or any kind of, when you talk about kind of giving people tests, has there been any kind of red flags there? Things that you would reflect on.
Yeah, I think there's an element of trusting your gut. There's also an element too of maybe overweighting consensus, that if you're hiring a role, obviously you want to make sure that you get your team members involved, but if ultimately they feel like the person who they would pick is not the person you would pick, you have to be willing to say, okay, hey, I actually think someone else is the right person. And then I think it's really being very thoughtful in the initial onboarding, and if there's red flags, you got to correct that right away, and then be willing to to ultimately say, hey, this wasn't the right decision. And thankfully that has not been the case many times, but certainly no track record is perfect.
Yeah, I think it's one of those. I think everyone needs to go through a few kind of failed hires where they didn't quite work out. You have that kind of feeling in your gut that it could go wrong, but things are. I've had it throughout my career where you've got other people in the hiring panel that think that the person's fantastic, and you think, okay, I'll go with their gut, even though there's something niggling in me, but we'll give it a go, and I'll do my best to make sure it works out. And then it doesn't, kind of sometimes. But I think those experiences, in my experience anyway, at least, help you make better decisions going forward. And I think without going through that pain, it's, you are just riding your luck, I think, when it comes to hiring. But lessons from your kind of side of that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree that, look, at a certain point, you have to have some negative experiences to get muscle memory. And you just kind of hope that, you can kind of learn quickly and not make the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
I will say that's, probably another area where, hiring Elizabeth made a huge difference, is that she had just much more experience to really, bring pattern recognition to areas and sort of help us. And she also just has an incredible intuition about people and emotional intelligence, and is really, like, her snap judgments about folks are just incredible.
Yeah. There's some people like that. They just wish you could bottle that, couldn't you?
Yeah, want to learn.
Absolutely. Can you think of some of the moments where, people have really impressed you at interview or on application, and the things that maybe stood out as to why? I'm guessing in the form of advice for anyone listening or watching, that these things are kind of top
It's a
tier.
real deal. Yeah, I think, well, first off, if you can get a referral from someone who already knows, right? Like, that's, if someone who I really respect says, hey, you have to take a look at Fred's amazing, then okay, great. You're already giving Fred the benefit of the doubt. They've done something well. Then I think, you can tell in some of these take-home exercises, like, how much effort someone's putting in, and, the quality of the ideas. And I think what I've really tried to do a better job of is going a little bit level deeper, right? Is to say, okay, ask the first question, the follow-up question, and then the follow-up question there. And usually by that third question, you can have a pretty good sense of, the depth of someone's knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the take-home tests are a little bit contentious sometimes, because, asking someone to do work before you've employed them. But I think it depends on how much time you expect them to put into it, and, really, how else are you going to?
Yeah, absolutely. And we I completely agree. We always try to be very clear to say, hey, this is we want you to spend 1 hour on this, right? And to, be clear about that time expectation. And, I think the other thing that have taken some solace is like, look, the best people who ultimately want to work for your company, I think they want to have that type of experience, right? Because it's, any good interview is a bi-directional, right? You're interviewing them and they're interviewing you. And so if you think about, for a company that you're really excited about, if they asked you to show your work, you'd say, oh, great, I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to show what I can do, because it's a way for me to really prove value. And so I think that, that really helps, is that reminding you that, okay, this also is a benefit to the person on the other side, because that ideal candidate would want to do that work because they find your company so exciting. Of course, if it's going to be 10 hours of work, you should pay them. But if you're asking someone to do 1 hour and you're clearly defined up front what the interview process is, that I think really, really goes a long way. And we always try to do that, is to say, okay, initial screening, at the end of that, if you're inviting someone on, you say, here's what the process looks like. It's follow-up interviews with my colleagues. It's a take-home exercise. It's, one more thing.
Yeah.
So you don't want to just sort of like have a undefined, open-ended process where you're sort of just like, dragging someone through.
I think that's the clear thing. It's the setting and managing expectations, of being clear up front what the process is, so you give people ample opportunity to either kind of agree to it, pull out, because if it's not for them, or challenge it, But just kind of one more step. I've seen that countless times over the years, where you end up on an 8 or 9 step interview process.
And, usually that's a sign that something's wrong at the company as well, right? If they can't make a decision about the interview, they probably also are not making decisions in a timely pace about key product features, or about key marketing, or about other things too, right? It's, you have to ultimately, to be successful at a startup especially, you have to be comfortable making decisions with some ambiguity. And that includes hiring.
Absolutely, yeah. It's I think a lot of companies, they forget that when they're interviewing, or when they're hiring, if you put an advert out on Indeed or one of the job boards or LinkedIn, there's potentially thousands of people seeing that advert, and every single person you interact with is getting some kind of exposure to your business, and then making a judgment on the culture and the character of the business. And if they're having a poor experience, you'll never know how many people they share that poor experience with, and they're more likely to share their poor experiences. That's why you get
absolutely.
lots of negative reviews on TripAdvisor, etc., because it annoys people. You're right. You either review something because you're really, really annoyed, or you've had an excellent experience. You very rarely review okay.
100%.
But no, and then the other thing about advertising, if that advert's been up so long, that's always a bad sign as well, because it's those unanswered questions like, why is this role still open? It's been 6 months. Can I not make a decision or what? Yeah. So yeah, it's a very complicated thing. But anyway, we're going off on a recruitment ramble. Let's bring it back to Ember. So 12 years in, Ember's still evolving. You've got some really exciting stuff coming up. What are you excited most about next, whether that be Gen 3 product or things further down the line, or just generally business-wise?
Yeah, so obviously the third generation is super exciting. I mean, the AI that we've developed to predict hot flashes, that's something that customers have been asking for years. So to have kind of proven the technical capability, that was a huge milestone, right? That's the hardest part, is to figure out, is this even possible? Obviously, productizing it is not easy, but that's easier than just trying to say, like, can we even do this? So that's exciting. It's I'd say a broader piece of the just sort of overall goal of continuing to scale. And like, we were always motivated by the idea of how can we help as many people who struggle with temperature to get relief and control. And that's always been the North Star. And it just feels like we're continuing on that journey. And it feels like with that ultimately the third generation hardware, but even before then, we've got a real opportunity to just continue to just drive market penetration, drive adoption, and to find new ways to help people become aware of the Ember Wave and that it exists.
Yeah, fantastic. And this is going to get a bit deep now, Sam. But
cool.
What kind of founder do you want to be in the next chapter?
Yeah, I think the type of founder that I want to be in the next chapter is ultimately one that puts the customer first, and that in doing so really creates the type of company that helps people bring out the best versions of themselves, right? So I think that's what the founders that I admire the most do, is they they bring out the best in people, and in doing so they're able to really help kind of bring their vision for serving customers into the world.
I love that. I very much kind of resonate with that. Be helpful, try and give people great experiences, and good things happen for everyone involved in that chain there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then final question, any reflections or advice for people that are building hardware companies in 2025?
I think building a hardware company is going to take longer than you think, and likely to take more capital than you think. And what seems to work best is if you can really focus on finding the market pull and letting customers really lead the process. I mean, when I think back to why did we make it this far and why have we been successful, we started as a completely unproven team with a completely new technology, with a completely new market. So it's like all of the risks. But what happened was just the market need was so strong that it kept pulling us forward. That it was so clear that when people with hot flashes found out about the idea of a cooling bracelet, they wanted it. And they wanted it so badly that we were able to take our first prototypes and prove enough demand to get capital and use that to launch the product, and they supported the first product. So if you can really find that customer segment that has that strong need for your hardware, that's going to really increase your probability of success. And then the second is to really build in the business model. Like the world in which we had launched a subscription model in Gen 2 from the beginning, or Gen 1, the company would look very different. And it's, I think, pretty clear at this point that hardware companies in the consumer space need some subscription component to build a sustainable business. So you can build that in from the beginning. I think you'll have just a much higher probability of success.
That's awesome. Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure sitting down with you and going through your journey and kind of just digging into that. So thank you again for spending the time with me.
My pleasure. This is so much fun.
That's
Thanks for
awesome.
having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Why Design, proudly powered by Kodu. If you got something out of today's conversation, I'd love it if you could leave a quick review or share the episode with someone who will find it useful. It really helps more people discover the show. And if you're working in hardware or physical product development, whether you're a founder, leader, engineer, or designer, come and join the Why Design community. We're running events, sharing insights, and connecting people who are building great things. You can sign up at teamkodu.com/events or just drop me a note on LinkedIn. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.